just the setting, but you are the stone. Over and over, forever I'll sing. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, hallelujah. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Bless the Lord, bless the Lord, bless the Lord.
Hallelujah, bless the Lord, bless the Lord. Hallelujah, bless the Lord, bless the Lord. Hallelujah, bless the Lord, oh my soul. We bless you with all our heart. We bless you, Lord, with all our heart.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here today. Welcome to Morningstar University's College of Leadership online/quarantine edition. Hope you're all doing well out there. I hope all our students are watching. Haven't seen many appear on Facebook yet, so I'm going to assume they're going to be joining us very shortly. But if you're also watching from other places, welcome to our Morningstar University free class on Morningstar TV. So, I was going to do this class last week, but I just returned from overseas and actually got a little bit sick, so I actually quarantined myself for the last 10 days. And having not got any sicker, I actually feel like I'm okay to be out and about a little bit these days. So here we are doing this class. So sorry about this, it's about a week late, but we want to give you an update and some information regarding this virus and some things that I feel like we should all know about what's going on, because I think a lot of times knowledge can prevent a lot of fear, and I think sometimes we're getting a lot of mixed messages from the internets and the different media outlets. And so I want to try and break through some of that stuff and just talk to you today about what is the coronavirus, what's going on with it, why is the world in a shutdown mode right now, and what can we do about it as Christians, as people in our communities, and so forth. So before I start all this, I want to talk a little bit about fear. We are not called to be those who are afraid, who live in fear. And, 2 Timothy 1:7, we have not been given a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And one of the things we really have to break through at this time is the idea of fear. Fear is irrational. It can cause a lot of things to get into our minds that are not true. You might be asking yourself a question like, why is everyone buying toilet paper right now? Why is toilet paper such a huge commodity? Well, part of that is fear. You might think about it as being part of the herd kind of like mentality, where people see someone else buying something and think, well, maybe they know more than I do about this, so they start buying it. And, there's no reason on earth to be buying lots of toilet paper right now other than it's comfort. And that's a comfort from our fear. We are fearful, we are anxious, and we try and grab on things that are going to give us comfort. So toilet paper is one of those kind of examples of how fear can grip us and can cause us to do things that are kind of irrational. I went down to the store the other day and I was trying to buy some groceries, and, all the things that could really help us during these times of a pandemic, the things that can strengthen our immune system, were all still on the shelves. But all things that can't really help us at this time, like toilet paper, were all gone. And this is an example of how fear can kind of overwhelm us a little bit. So we want to kind of break through a lot of that stuff today. The Bible commands us many times to fear not. But also I wanted to go back to Psalm 91, 1-7. I want to read this at the start because it's important that we kind of get the biblical perspective on where we're at and what God is kind of like talking to us about and how we should position ourselves at this time. So Psalm 91, I'm going to read it out here. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrows that fly by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but none of it will come near you. The real point of all this is those who dwell in the shadow of the Almighty, those who dwell close to the Lord. And this is a time when we should be all getting closer to the Lord and not dwelling in fear or anxiety. And so what I want to go through again today is how can we avoid being in fear, but also how can we avoid spreading fear? Because there's a couple of things that can become infectious during these kind of times. And one of them is fear. Fear is actually infectious. You can pass fear on. And especially if you're passing on false information on Facebook or social media platforms, you can actually create more fear. And we're not called to be those who pass on fear, but those who operate in peace. We're called to be peacemakers. So how do we go out into this time and be peacemakers? How do we dwell in peace and how do we pass on peace. Now, of course, there are things to be concerned about and there are things to be careful about, but we're not talking about living in fear, we're talking about living in faith, but also walking wisely. It's very important that we walk wisely at this time, okay? We don't live by faith so we can go and do whatever we want and just run out there and, ignore all the government regulations or the government shutdowns or whatever. We want to be wise. We want to be wise in how we act and behave at this time. So I'm going to jump through a few things here. Don't go to the PowerPoint right now. But the other big thing I want to talk about today is it's a new kind of phenomenon we dwell with in this new age, and that's the infodemic. We want to be careful of the infodemic. This is a contagious spread of misinformation, and it is problematic and it is dangerous and it can cause lives to be lost and opportunities to be missed. So this information comes at us in different ways, and this pandemic has kind of highlighted some of these, the people out there who just want to cause trouble, who want to the trolls, the internet trolls who just want to cause havoc in the world, who spread misinformation. You may have seen some of it online already. I think I saw one where someone was telling people to drink bleach to prevent getting infected with coronavirus. This is an example of misinformation. We don't drink bleach. That's not a good idea to do that. We have to be really careful. A couple of ways the information has come out there is just through crazy headlines, panicking headlines. That's kind of, again, it's spreading fear, it's spreading misinformation. The scams are operating. We have a lot of internet websites being set up that are selling corona packages or coronavirus protection packages, but you spend lots of money on something that isn't worth much, and you may get nothing in the end at all. So we're seeing a lot of investment opportunities coming up through this, where people are trying to invest in this company that's producing coronavirus packages or whatever. So we're seeing a lot of scams coming up, scams that are coming with the names of WHO, the World Health Organization, on them. These things are just kind of all over the place right now. So we've got to be really careful that we aren't taking this information in and putting it back out there. Okay, we have to be really careful about the information we are spreading at this time. Of course, we all love the media and how much, they make their money by being sensational. They don't, tend to calm things down. They tend to ramp things up. They make you watch by being aggravated and by being, by irritating us and causing us to get upset. And that's how we watch their shows. And so they're always spreading the worst case information or the misrepresenting information, etc. So what I want to do today is just kind of give you some ideas of where you should be going for good information. I have spent a lot of time looking at the cdc.gov website. This is a great website for real information about how you can take care of yourself at this time, symptoms, all the things you want to know about the coronavirus is available on the cdc.gov website. This is a one-stop shop for all the information you might need. Now, again, it's real information, it's solid science, it's not going to be speculative about, they're not trying to sell ads on this website, they're just basically giving you the information they know at the time. Now, this virus is a moving target. This is not a simple situation we're dealing with. It's unfolding. This is a new virus that's come into the world and is unfolding, and our understanding of it is also unfolding. And so if you go to the CDC, you're going to see more of an American-based understanding or American-based website of information related to what's going on in America. The other one to go to is the WHO.international or .int. This is a great website to see the spread of the disease across the world and what's going on, but also how the WHO is combating this. WHO is also a non-political entity, and they're doing a great job at trying to contain this. There's some incredible scientists and people who are working for these organizations that are risking their own lives to go into these areas and trying to understand what's happening, to find the virus, to find the source of the virus, and so forth. The other one I want to mention too, which is for those who are more interested in the science behind some of this stuff, cidrap.umn.edu, if that's on the screen there just at the bottom. This is the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Prevention. And this is headed up by a guy called Dr. Michael Osterholm, who's kind of one of my heroes of science. I'm a medical scientist by background, and we have our heroes too. And he's one of my kind of heroes. He's written a lot of books about this. He's written about the coronavirus pandemic. I think it was 10 years ago this is going to happen. So this is not a surprise to many scientists what's going on today. It's happening for the last several hundred years, and it's going to continue happening for the next couple hundred years. These emerging new viruses. You may not know this, but there are more viruses on Earth than there are stars in the universe. I think I read somewhere that there was 700 million viruses for every square yard of Earth. So viruses are everywhere, they're all around us, and we're constantly learning more about them. And this CIDRAP is more about the science of it, and it's very interesting. And again, Dr. Michael Osterholm is an incredible man. He's done some great shows recently about the virus, and he understands this intrinsically. So let me give you an example of just how fast misinformation spreads. So for the first 90 days of this pandemic, when it first started in December 31st, 2019, until about a couple of weeks ago, there was probably just over 350,000 engagements on the WHO and CDC websites. So about 350,000 shares, likes, comments, etc. on the WHO and CDC websites. In the same time frame, there were 72 misinformation websites that received 52 million engagements. So the real information is not getting out there, but the misinformation is spreading at a rate incredibly higher than the true information. So this is what I want to refer to as the infodemic, okay? This is a contagious misinformation spreading across the world into our minds, creating fear, panic, etc. So bottom line for all this is don't catch false information and don't spread false information about the COVID. So if you're a social media expert of some kind, or influencer, or whatever you want to consider yourself to be, don't put information out there unless it's backed by some pretty substantial websites or some scientists, etc. Avoid the infodemic, and spreading false information is spreading fear. So just be careful of that. We're not called to be those who spread fear. We're called to those who spread faith and peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. So I want to talk about that first. And again, while we're going through this show, feel free to make some comments, ask questions. We're going to address all the questions we can on this show today. And during this class time, I'm looking at my Facebook right now, just checking on if there's any questions. I still haven't seen many students pop up yet, so if you're a student, make some comments and let us know that you're online and watching. But yeah, so if you have any questions at all, we're going to have about a 10-minute break every hour, so I'll be able to review some of the questions and address them as we go through the day. So let's talk about the coronavirus itself. And again, this is my background. My background is microbiology, medical science, and so forth. And so I really enjoy studying these things and understanding these things. And I've done a couple of talks at Morningstar over the last 6 months regarding sheltering in place and preparing for these pandemics. And it is kind of remarkable to be sitting here today with the world almost in shutdown mode, facing an actual pandemic. This is the first time in my lifetime, in many people's lifetimes, that a pandemic has been called. We've had some scares in the past. We had some bird flu crop up around the 2005, I think, 2006. We've had SARS appear. We've had some other viruses pop up. But this is the first time we've really jumped into a pandemic, where the WHO has declared a global pandemic. So I want to talk a little bit about coronavirus and what really it is and what really it isn't. And then also, how we can deal with it. So, coronaviruses have been around for a long time. They've been around for centuries. There are 7 known coronaviruses that infect humans. There are many more, but there are only 7 that infect humans, and this COVID-19 is the 7th one. So there are 6 previously known coronaviruses that infect humans. 4 of them are responsible for about 30% of the yearly common colds we get. So many of us probably have already had coronaviruses before in the past, just the little cold symptoms, so forth. But we have had some recent emergence of some more serious forms of the coronavirus coming out. And so let me just jump across here to, so the coronavirus, as you all probably know this by now, probably a lot of information out there, is known for, if you want to jump onto the, there you go. This is a picture of the coronavirus, the first picture ever taken of the coronavirus. And if you can see it clearly there, there's got that, the outside kind of, they call it a crown, but it's like these projections. And that's what the coronavirus means. It's like a crown around it. So corona means crown. Here's a better picture of it. So you have these protein spikes on the outside of this virus. Viruses are basically pretty simple things. They're no longer considered to be life. They're not living creatures. They're sub-life, and for various reasons. But inside the virus, you just have some RNA. Then you have this coat with these protein spikes sticking out of it. These protein spikes are very important. These are what attach to our cells. So these protein spikes attach to our cells and our bodies. Only certain cells have the right connection point for those protein spikes, and that's how the virus enters into our cells, and that's how it infects us. It's important to note there's a lipid coat around it. That's a fatty layer that kind of holds it all together. And that becomes important to know because when they tell you to wash your hands for 20 seconds, washing your hands with soap destroys this virus. It breaks down and tears up the lipid coat. And so washing hands doesn't just get rid of the virus off you, it actually kills the virus. Okay, so it's not too difficult to destroy. So there's that. So as I mentioned before, there were 6 coronaviruses. Let's just show this on the screen quickly. There are 6 coronaviruses that are known to us that infect humans, and COVID-19 is number 7. The 2 most important ones we've known about just recently or have made the news recently is the SARS and the MERS. The SARS is a severe acute respiratory syndrome, and the MERS is the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. These came out recently, and there was a lot of kind of panic and fear around, especially SARS when it first appeared, but it was very short-lived, and I'll talk about why that is. But moving across to talk about a little bit about SARS, again, these are 2 most famous ones. SARS appeared in around 2002 in the Guangdong, China region of China, possibly from a civet, which is basically like a mongoose, a larger mongoose. The farmer who contracted it was admitted to hospital with some sort of respiratory problems, which led to pneumonia. A traveling doctor went to check it out, and he actually caught the virus and took it back to Hong Kong, where he stayed in a hotel. And I'm mentioning this, I want to show you just how quickly this virus can spread around the world, and why SARS was kind of like a starting point for us to look at this new virus. So this doctor returned to Hong Kong, stayed in a hotel, stayed on the 9th floor of the Metropole Hotel on February 21st, 2003. He died several days later when he went back home, but from his hotel room, that disease, from the hotel he stayed in, the disease spread all around the world. And looking at this picture right here, you're going to see in the red the room he stayed in, room 911. He stayed in that room, and the other rooms that are highlighted in this picture in the brown are the ones that contracted the disease and then took it around the world when they left the hotel themselves. So no one really fully understood why or how they caught the disease from the guy in the hotel. There was some speculation that he may have thrown up before he entered his hotel room on the carpet. People may have walked through that. They may have transferred through the air, through the ventilation, but no one has really had a good understanding of how that spread to those people in the hotel. Because as you can see from the picture, there was people in different parts of the hotel, but all on the same floor. One person speculated that possibly when he walked into the lobby of the hotel and pressed the number 9 button to go to the 9th floor, then everyone else on the 9th floor would have pressed the same button. So it's possible they all got it from just pressing the 9 button on the elevator, and that's also kind of scary how quickly that can pass. But anyway, this is a picture from the CDC, and what you're looking at here is basically in the middle it says Hong Kong, Hotel M, Hong Kong, with the guy in the red, patient A, one who contracted it from the Guangdong province. And just from those people in that hotel room, you see that it went to Canada, Ireland, United States, Germany, Singapore, Vietnam, Bangkok, and all around Hong Kong. So we live in a very different world today with the ability for diseases to spread very quickly all over the place. And so SARS became a very big scare very quickly, but as quickly as it became a problem, it quickly vanished. I'll talk about why that is in a little bit, but the SARS virus itself only lasted, the actual spread of it only lasted about 2 years. There was about 8,000 cases and about 770 deaths. So it wasn't a huge global impact on this one. The overall mortality rate was about 9%. People over 60, it was closer to 50%. There was insufficient transmission, and this is what we want to talk about a bit later on. We'll talk about the new COVID virus and why it is doing so much better than the SARS virus did. This SARS was effectively shut down by quarantining the patients. Now, the SARS virus spread symptomatically. What that means is that you had to be sick, had to be feeling sick, coughing, chest congestion, fever, before you spread the disease. So it's very easy to quarantine people who are sick. And most people who do get sick tend to stay at home, so the virus was very limited in its ability to spread. What we're facing right now with the coronavirus, as probably many of you already know, is that it's spreading asymptomatically, which means that you don't have to be sick to be spreading the virus. In fact, you can be spreading the virus for 4 to 5 days prior to symptoms. And that's why it's so important right now that we do behave ourselves and act very wisely and we maintain social distancing. The government's very clear about that. We need to slow this virus down. We can't stop it right now. This virus is going to be probably with us for the rest of our lives. They'll eventually develop some vaccines for it. Talk about that a bit later as well. But right now, this will become just another thing we deal with seasonally, like the flu. Again, as many people have heard, the flu kills quite a few thousand people every year. And we may just be facing another virus that kills a certain amount of people every year until the vaccine is created. The one thing that the flu has over coronavirus is the flu mutates seasonally. And so every year we're dealing with a new flu virus that can't be recognized by our old vaccines. So we have to create new vaccines every year for the new flu strains. With the coronavirus, it doesn't seem to be the case. If we develop a vaccine for coronavirus, we may deal with it once and for all. During the SARS outbreak, they started to develop some vaccines for SARS, but because the virus vanished and was dealt with through quarantine, there was no more emphasis or no more impetus to continue researching a vaccine. Now, we have not had any more reported SARS cases since 2003, and so it's not eradicated. It's still out there. It still exists in probably the bat population. You're going to hear a lot about bats when you talk about coronaviruses. But looking at this picture right here, this is a newsstand, and as you can see, there were some concerns about the SARS virus. All over the news for a while, everywhere, it's something that vanishes away. Now again, we are not dealing with a SARS-like virus as far as this new one is much more infectious. I'll talk about why that is a bit later on, but this will be around for a while. This is not going away anytime soon, but eventually we'll develop vaccines for it. not quickly. Some vaccines take a long time to develop. Probably within 18 months, we'll have a vaccine for this. We've got to be careful just how we deal with it. All right, so MERS is another coronavirus. This is the second coronavirus that came out. This one came out in 2012, I believe, yes. In the Middle East, a man in Saudi Arabia died of acute pneumonia and renal failure. The interesting thing about the coronaviruses is they attach to what's called the ACE2 receptor on our cells. The cells that contain the ACE2 receptor, which means nothing to you guys right now, but exist in our lungs and in our kidneys. And so the renal failure can be part of that because the virus can actually attack kidney cells. There's only been about 3,000 cases of the MERS virus since it appeared in 2012. It is still around today. It is spread through camels. So unless you're around camels in Saudi Arabia, you're probably pretty safe from the MERS virus. They've had about 900 deaths, but the interesting thing about the MERS virus is the mortality rate was about 30%. So it's a much higher mortality rate than SARS, but very low in the ability for it to be infectious. So here we have like two coronaviruses that appeared in the last 20 years. One was infectious to a degree, but able to be controlled by quarantine and had a pretty good mortality rate, around 9%. Then we had the MERS one appear, which was not very contagious, didn't spread very quickly, but had a really high mortality rate. So when this new virus appears, this new COVID-19 appears, the question is going to be, what will it be like? Will it be infectious with a high mortality rate? Who will it kill? These viruses tend to differ in the populations they actually impact. For example, the Spanish flu, you might have heard about the Spanish flu in 1918 that killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. The only disease that ever put a dent in the population curve. It was very infectious, but it tended to kill disproportionately younger people around their 20s. So the curve was kind of like very few young people died, then lots of middle kind of 20, 30 age people died, then very few older people died. And part of the reason was that a lot of people died from an overreaction from the immune system. So it wasn't the virus itself that killed the people, it was the immune system that overreacted to the virus. So the stronger your immune system was, the more likely you were to flood your lungs with these cytokines that cause you to have, to drown in your own fluids, basically. Now, this virus, this new COVID-19 virus, tends to be killing the older population, the 60 plus, especially the 80 plus population with conditions. So this is a 60, 80 plus existing condition. So these viruses are different every time. So again, as we're dealing with the COVID-19 virus and we're looking at how it's transmitting and how it's moving through the population, we're still learning a lot. There's still a lot of things that we don't know about it that we're trying to figure out, but we're starting to see patterns emerge. And again, this is not over by a long way. We've still got many, many weeks, if not months, for this to peak. And again, it's going to peak in different countries in different time periods. So you're going to see it probably, I know China said they're kind of like over it, but I don't know about that. We'll see. But yeah, so this is going to affect different countries in different levels. So moving across to the actual virus itself, this new virus, this COVID-19, again, this appeared in December 31st, 2019. They started noticing people coming in with pneumonia, severe pneumonia, and people dying. And so basically, they went to investigate it. One of the doctors who actually first talked about it actually contracted the disease and died. But eventually, the Chinese government identified it as a new coronavirus. And this new coronavirus is now being called COVID-19. And again, it's the seventh virus that does cause infections. And again, this new virus is still revealing itself to us, and we're learning a lot about it. But so far, we do know that it is way more infectious than SARS and has a lower mortality than MERS. And this may be with us for a long time. So we do know that may become a seasonal thing again, like the flu. Remember, the Spanish flu of 2018 was the H1N1 strain. It killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide, and some people believe it infected everybody on the whole planet at one point. But that H1N1 virus is still around today. It is still the most common form of the flu we deal with every season. So what starts off as a bird flu becomes just a normal seasonal flu. And so we see that happening, and this may become the same situation where we just start dealing with this every year. Again, vaccines will eventually come out and take care of it, and maybe even eradicate it completely. And again, because these viruses don't mutate like the influenza virus is a very sloppy virus, a very messy virus. So when it's repacking itself, when it's kind of, in our cells and replicating inside our cells, it doesn't do a great job of doing it very neatly. So it creates all these mutations. Now, I'm kind of speaking in very simple terms here, so obviously more complicated than all that. But basically, this COVID-19 virus doesn't have the same sloppiness, therefore it's not mutating like the influenza virus does. So vaccines are definitely possible to do this. Now again, vaccines take time. I think I was reading that the vaccine for the rotavirus is a intestinal disease or virus that was killing about 100,000 children a year. It took 26 years to develop the vaccine for that virus. So these things do take time. But with the whole world working on a vaccine right now for the COVID virus, I think we'll get that a lot quicker. There's a lot more impetus on it right now. So I did this talk on March 4th, and at that point there was 93,000 confirmed cases with only 3,000 deaths. 20 days later, we are over 330 cases and 14,000 deaths. I think it took, I'm going to try and say this correctly, it took 30 odd days for it to pass the 100,000 mark, 11 days to pass 11 more days to pass the 200,000 mark, and only 4 more days to pass the 300,000 mark. So this is accelerating. And this is what we see in the spread of viruses as this exponential curve, where it just kind of accelerates really quickly. It may start off slowly, but it accelerates rapidly. So we have to be really careful. I know in the US, as of March the 4th, there was only 100 cases. But as of today, there's been 33,000 cases. So you can see this is not slowing down, this is speeding up. And there's been total deaths, 400 deaths, and right now every state is reporting cases, including 4 territories. So we're starting to see this virus get all over the place, and how long that will take for it to peak and start to slow down, we're not quite sure. So what we do know about this virus, and this is kind of maybe a little old information, any information from a week ago is probably old information, but the mortality rate that people are talking about right now with this virus is about the 3% range, but it does dramatically vary by age. So from 0 to 60, the mortality rate is close to 0. It's about 0.9%, or it was 0.9%. No one under the age of 10 has died from the coronavirus. It's not affecting the children very much. There was reports out of Italy that the pediatric hospitals were all basically empty, where all the other hospitals were overwhelmed. I think only 8 people at that point had died under 30 years old. But when you get above 60, it starts to climb to about 4%. Then when you get above 80, it climbs to about 30%. So it does dramatically increase with age. The other big factor is pre-existing conditions. So if you have age plus a condition, okay, so if you're 60 plus and you have diabetes, you're 60 plus and you have heart disease, you're 60 plus and you have cancer, you're 60 plus and you have lung issues or respiratory problems, this is where the real risk group is at. So if you're in that range, then it is absolutely imperative you stay at home, stay isolated from people. I saw a picture the other day of a guy who went to visit his grandpa, and he was sitting outside the window talking to his grandfather through the window. And that's basically what we've got to be at. People over 60 with conditions, people over 80 especially, need to really be protecting them at this point. Don't go visit your grandparents at this time. If they're sick, don't be spreading this around. But yeah, so that's where it's really kind of hitting the people the hardest. Moving right along here. Yeah, so the mortality rate for older people over 60, 70, 80 with comorbidities, additional concerns, can be as high as 50%. So that's very high, and that's really problematic. We do know the incubation period for this virus is about 2 to 14 days. Usually around 4 days, you'll start seeing symptoms. So if you are quarantined, and you did get the disease, you are quarantined, you should start seeing symptoms around 4 days. 4 to 7 days is about the limit. That's why we're telling everyone stay home for 14 days if you can. And once you start seeing symptoms, then you can get help. The biggest issue, of course, is breathing. If you do have this, you have fever and the cough and so forth. But the real symptom that we're looking for is the difficulty breathing. Get to that in a little bit as well. The other thing I want to talk about is, again, this is the moving target. We're really not quite sure how this is going to play out. We are in unprecedented territory as a world, as a country. This is, again, the first time WHO has declared a pandemic definitely in our lifetimes. And so we're just not quite sure what's going to go from here. No one's sure how the economy is going to survive this. No one's sure how the virus is going to spread or continue to spread. Will it get worse? Will it get better? Will it go away? This is very definitely uncharted territory. But I do want to mention one thing. I heard Rick Joyner say this the other day, and I really agree with this. This is not going to be the last one, but this is a great trial run for a worse one. So what I'm saying, what you're saying there is that, if we get a disease as infectious as this one is, but with the mortality rate like Ebola, for example, then we're dealing with something much more dangerous. And a lot of scientists do fear something like that. But this is a great way to kind of learn what do we do better. As a country, as a community, as individual families, how do we prepare ourselves better for something like this? And so I really do believe this is a trial run for a much worse situation that might come up later on. Again, we don't know when viruses will pop out from nature. We have no control over it. Viruses mutate all the time. They jump species all the time. So you never really know when the next one will come out and where it will come from. I know a lot of people talk about China as being the source for a lot of viruses, and that is the case, unfortunately. And a lot of that's related to the population density, and especially the population density with regard to their livestock. So they're very intimately connected to their livestock. Their animals live in their houses, or they do eat a lot of exotic animals that they find in nature. And so all that kind of adds to this mix of humans, animals, and viruses all coming together, and in that kind of a massive population of mix, you're starting to see things jump across species and jump into humans. People have asked me, why do bats become the source for a lot of these viruses? Bats are interesting creatures. They have a very strong, very powerful immune system, and as a result of that, only some of the strongest viruses can survive being in bats. So bats tend to be the source of a lot of more severe viruses, because there's it's like a testing ground for virus. If you can survive a bat, you can survive anywhere. And so that's why bats become part of this process. And usually bats will pass it on to some other animal. For example, during the MERS outbreak, it was the bats passing it on to the camels that passed on to humans. With this possible one, it looks like it came through another intermediate in the marketplaces, the wet markets of Wuhan. But yeah, so we're starting to see, that's why China is kind of a source for all this kind of stuff. It's just such a dense population living so closely connected to their animals and livestock and so forth. All right, so where are we at? I'll jump through all this stuff. What time is it? All right. So again, what I want to do is just kind of take a break every hour and just kind of let you guys ask some questions. And if you have any questions, post them on Facebook and we'll get to them. Anything we've talked about so far, and if we haven't talked about it yet, we're going to go into the symptoms of the coronavirus, the prevention and the treatment of coronavirus next. Again, this is a source of a lot of misinformation, especially the treatment. I heard a report of a guy who just recently died from taking too much chloroquine, which has been suggested as a way to cure the virus. So we've got to be really careful about how we treat ourselves in this situation. Again, we don't want to drink bleach to try and cure ourselves. But what can we do if it's around us? We're going to talk about it next hour. Let's have a little break right now. And it's a bit early, but we'll have a little break. It's a good time to have a break. Ask some questions online, and then we'll come back at probably 10 o'clock, and we'll go into the next hour of symptoms, prevention, and treatment of the coronavirus. Then we're going to move into some other stuff about what do we do at home and how do we take care of ourselves at home with our families. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you shortly.
show me what love is. We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine love. We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine Run away, now a son. Oh, my father, you call me home. Always show me what love is. Run away, now a son. Oh, my father, you call me home. Always show me what love is. You always show me what love is. We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine love. We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine Come and show me what love is. 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 We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine love. We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine love. We are free with the swine love. We let go to the swine
Stir the stagnant waters of my soul. Merge me with your river, which brings life. I don't have all the right words to say that will provoke you to want me any more than you already do. my darkness where I hide. Pull me into your arms, your arms of peace. Reaching past my hiding, Lord, reach out to my running. Oh Lord, come fill my soul with your love. Won't you come like you promised? Pour out the Spirit, pour out the Spirit. Won't you come like you promised? Pour out the Spirit, pour out the Spirit. Won't you come like you promised? Pour out the Spirit, pour out the Spirit. Won't you come like you promised? Pour out the Spirit, pour out the Spirit. You love like a father, you love like a brother, you love like a lion, fierce like no other. You violently chase me down to embrace me, engulf me in who you are.
Okay, well, welcome back. Hope this is helping a little bit. I forgot to mention who I was earlier on today. My name is Nathan Plowman. I'm the director of Morningstar University. I have a background in cancer research, as well as I was a sleep disorders scientist for many years in Australia. And I have a degree in microbiology. So I have a lot of understanding of these situations. I was a medical scientist for a long time, and I really am fascinated by our bodies and our immune system. I'm going to talk about the immune system in a little bit, but I will say this. Our immune systems are the most complex, wonderfully created, well-designed systems you could possibly imagine. If I had the time, I could spend 3 hours just talking about how our immune system works and just how complex and how exact it is, and how, if we're smart, we'll take the time to really strengthen our immune systems. Before we were talking about pre-existing conditions and how that's a big factor for the death rate in this current virus pandemic. What that really means is people who are sick tend to have a compromised immune system. The immune system is weak or broken down. And that's what leads to this virus being able to run rampant and cause more problems in those people. So we really are going to talk about this next session about how do we really strengthen our immune system? How do we do things that will benefit our immune system and stop doing things that are killing our immune systems? But a couple of questions that were asked over the break. And again, sorry for the long break. It was just a good time to stop right there, and I want to keep it to the hour. So anyway, someone asked if the new 5G phone systems will affect this virus, and will it affect the breathlessness of this virus? The answer is probably no. It doesn't need to. The virus itself will dealing with your lungs. This COVID-19 can get into your upper respiratory system and your lower respiratory system, causing the breathlessness. So when it starts attacking your alveoli, the very place where our oxygen and carbon dioxide is exchanged into our blood and out of our blood, that results in a inability to get good breath and to breathe properly, and that's what causes the breathlessness. So it doesn't need any help from any other sources. It does that quite well by itself, and I think you're going to see this virus be as effective in third world countries where there is no 5G as there is in countries where there is 5G. Someone mentioned the Middle East. I had a visitor from the Middle East mentioned it's really bad over there. Yes, it's going to be bad over there. Part of the reason I spent a lot of time, I lived in Egypt for a while, and one thing about the Middle East is that a lot of people are smokers. And so smoking is one of the things you can really mess with your immune system and also mess with your lungs' ability to take care of itself. The lungs are also well equipped to deal with foreign particles getting in there, but when you start smoking, you inhibit the natural ability of your lungs to clear itself. And so smokers are going to suffer a lot in this kind of situations. And the Middle East is, a lot of people smoke in the Middle East. And so there's going to be a big problem in the Middle East in that situation. So if you are a smoker, now is probably a really good time to stop smoking. And again, we'll discuss that later on when we talk about how to help the immune system and not kill the immune system. Natural remedies. This is a really controversial topic, and I know a lot of people have been posting online, and I know other ministries are selling products that claim to cure this disease. I'd be very reluctant and very cautious about those kind of situations. There is no reason on earth why the medical profession and other people would withhold information about how to cure this, but they tend to be more science-based and want to know the truth of something before they actually promote it to anybody. So just be really cautious about putting your trust and faith in a lot of unsubstantiated claims when it comes to certain products. Again, the best way to deal with this is to have a strong immune system. Viruses are notoriously hard to stop. That's because they replicate inside our own cells. Bacteria don't do that. Bacteria are they line things, they kind of get into our system, but we can kill them with antibacterial drugs. For example, penicillin, one of the most classic of all the antibiotics, it can kill bacteria quite easily because what it does is it punches holes in the cell wall of bacteria, causing the bacteria to explode. Viruses don't have a cell wall like a bacteria does. So penicillin has absolutely no effect against a virus. And again, if the virus is inside our cells, then the only way to kill it is to kill our cells. But how do you target a cell with a virus in it? So you have to stop the virus getting into the cells or stop it replicating within the cells. It's a very complex process. And there's a lot of different ways people are trying to attack viruses. You may have heard of Tamiflu. Back when the bird flu was a big deal, everyone was talking about Tamiflu as being the cure for the bird flu. Well, Tamiflu is a very interesting drug. It doesn't kill anything. What it does is it prevents the virus, I think it was H5N2, I believe, that got into our cells and replicates and then starts to, once the virus gets into our cells, it replicates inside our cells using our own machinery. We actually make the virus for the virus. It hijacks our cells' machinery to make itself. And then it starts to bud off our cells. So once one virus goes into one of our cells and thousands come out. And that's how it infects so quickly. But this Tamiflu, what it didn't kill it, didn't stop it. It just prevented it from leaving the cell. So these viruses would get made, they get packaged, and they'll try and bud off our cells, but they get stuck. So Tamiflu prevented the virus from leaving our cell. So when the virus is stuck on our cell, it can't do anything. So the system stops. Unfortunately, Tamiflu had a lot of side effects as well that weren't very great, but that's how the Tamiflu is stopping the virus from spreading. It was making it get stuck onto our cells. So, again, viruses are notoriously hard to deal with. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. We'll talk about some treatments and some ideas about what we're trying to do. We're going to discuss vaccines a little bit. There's a lot of controversy around vaccines. We'll talk about that a bit later on. The other question that keeps on coming up, and it's always one that I hear a lot about, is, was this virus man-made? Was it weaponized? I don't have any information about that. I know some people who have made those comments and who have much more information than I do, have much more situational awareness than I do, have much more access to higher levels of government than I do. But I will say this, it doesn't have to be man-made. There's no reason why it should be man-made. Whether it is or not doesn't really affect where we're at right now. But, China, again, is the source of a lot of viruses. And so it's not surprising, this is not unusual for this virus to come out of China. It's not unusual for a new virus to appear. If you know much about the seasonal flu, and you take the vaccine for the flu every year, That vaccine is usually a trivalent vaccine. That means there's 3 vaccines in that vaccine. And in order to create that vaccine, the scientists will go to China about 9 months prior to our seasonal flu season, and will kind of study the circulating strains around China and try and pick the top 3 strains that are in China at the time, then bring them back to America, create vaccines based on those 3 strains, and hopefully by the time the flu spreads all the way to America, we'll have the vaccines ready, and hopefully one of those strains that came across to America is the ones the scientists chose to be in the vaccines. Now, most years that's correct. Occasionally, in the past, they have missed the strain that came to America, so their vaccines were useless. But generally speaking, they are pretty good at that stuff. So again, all these viruses are coming out of China. Again, SARS coming out of China. MERS didn't. MERS is a little bit different. But again, it's just this you got like 2 billion people living with 16 billion animals in very close proximity, and it's just a kind of a melting pot of humans and animals that's going to create this kind of virus interchange. And again, these viruses are constantly trying to get into cells, and occasionally they'll do that. But let's talk about, that's all we're going to talk about today for the question. Sorry for the last session. Yeah, that's all I had. Let's talk about the symptoms, prevention, and treatment. So, as you may know, the symptoms related to the coronavirus are basically fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Now, they're not necessarily unsimilar to the flu or a bad cold, and so it's hard to know when you go to the hospital, when you go to the doctors for this kind of thing. So the shortness of breath is one of the one of the more concerning factors of this. If you are experiencing shortness of breath, you need to call your doctor or call the hospital and let them know you're coming in. Do not just turn up at a hospital or your doctors with coronavirus, because they'll just spread it around. We don't want to be sitting in the doctor's office for an hour waiting for our doctor to see us and spreading coronavirus everywhere. So if you do have the symptoms and you are concerned about these things, then make sure you call ahead before you go anywhere. The big thing, though, also to remember is that you're looking for symptoms plus history. What that means is you want to make sure that you have a history of possible exposure to the coronavirus. Now, if you're living on an island in the middle of the Pacific somewhere and you get sick, you have no history of connection or getting it from somebody else. If you're in China recently and you come home and you start getting these symptoms, then you have history. So you have symptoms plus history. So symptoms alone are not going to really be able to tell you where you're at with this virus. We had a student on campus recently who had all the symptoms of coronavirus, which is pretty much the same symptoms as influenza virus, as any other virus that causes cold and flu symptoms. And she was isolated, she got tested, and she was found to have influenza A, the typical H1N1 virus. So just be aware that just because you have symptoms doesn't mean you have the virus. Okay, don't panic, don't freak out. Just think about your exposure. If you're at a party and suddenly all your friends at the party start getting sick and getting tested for coronavirus and they're positive, then yes, get tested, get checked out. But isolate yourself especially. It's really key at this time that we do listen and uphold the idea of social distancing. This is kind of key to what the government's trying to do. You may have heard the term flatten the curve. We're not trying to stop the virus anymore, we're trying to slow it down. And by slowing it down, what we're really trying to do is allow the hospitals and the medical community the breathing space to deal with a slow influx of patients instead of a massive influx of patients quickly. So we're trying to spread out the actual cases coming into the hospital over time, rather than have them all come in now, overwhelm the system, and then the system breaks down and people die because they don't have ventilators, they don't have the treatment, the staff. It's very important that, yes, we pray for our communities and our families and stuff like that, but it's really important we start praying for our healthcare workers this time. Healthcare workers are some of the most hardworking, dedicated people and most underpaid people on the planet. I used to work very closely with nurses and other people in the industry, and it was just like, I just can't even imagine the things they have to do and things they have to deal with every day. And so we really need to pray for these guys. And again, if, they are the frontline warriors of this disease. And they have been victims many times themselves. Like in the SARS, for example, a lot of the healthcare workers were the ones who were mostly affected by the SARS virus, and with MERS as well. And so, and even in the 2018 Spanish flu, basically the nurses and doctors were taking their lives in their own hands by trying to treat patients. And a lot of them died treating patients. So really pray for our healthcare workers and the people in hospitals. I mean, people coming out of retirement to jump in and help right now. They're running out of masks, they're running out of protective gear, and they're still stepping in and trying to help. And that's just, the true heroes of this whole situation are our doctors and nurses. So keep praying for them. And if you happen to have hoarded masks or protective gear, please take them to your local hospital and drop them off and help them out. It's not a time when we need to worry about masks too much, but we need to make sure that our frontline people are protected from this. So say a prayer for a nurse, and if you know somebody, take them a care package. Probably caffeine of some kind would be helpful. Okay, so talk about prevention. Again, the best way to deal with this is to prevent getting it. And you've probably heard about obviously social distance, stay at home, don't touch your eyes and face, and mouth. And these are what we call NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions. So these are things we can just all do everywhere to avoid spreading the disease. Now, washing your hands was a big one. And again, we talked about how the virus has a lipid coat, which is like a fat layer around it to hold it all together. And by washing your hands for 20 seconds, it destroys the virus. It doesn't wash it off your hands. It actually destroys the virus by tearing apart this lipid coat around the virus. So that is why we're constantly being told to wash your hands, especially when you go out, especially if you go to the gas station and you're pumping some gas, wash your hands. If you go to the supermarket and you're pushing a trolley around, wash your hands. All these things are sources of contact for the virus, but so constantly washing your hands will prevent you from moving it around. And avoid touching your eyes and your nose and your mouth at this time. Treat your hands like they are contagious all the time, and you should be okay. Now again, washing your hands will destroy it. Let's talk about face masks. Face masks are, a lot of people, you see people walking around these days with face masks on, and they are in supermarket and they're planes. Face masks are not 100% effective against this virus unless they're fitted properly and unless you have the correct ones. So they're not being recommended by the CDC for the population to be walking around wearing them. And part of that also is that, the healthcare workers need them. We don't want to be buying up all the supplies the healthcare workers need. So really leave them for the healthcare workers who are on the front lines, who are dealing with people all the time, who are actually sick. But if you are sick and you do have a cough and, congestion and so forth, you can wear a face mask to prevent spreading it. That's important as well. So if you're a healthy person walking around normally, you don't need to wear a face mask. It may feel more secure for you, it may feel safer, but it's not really that effective. But again, especially if you're wearing a face mask and you rub your eyes, you haven't really helped yourself very much at all, or picked your nose, or taking the face mask off and touching your face or whatever it is. That's going to be great sources of protection. So leave them for the healthcare workers, and just stay away from people generally at this time. Now, as far as surface and environmental concerns with this virus, yes, this virus can survive on surfaces. Now, there's a lot of dispute and a lot of differing kind of information about this, but it seems like it can survive on metal surfaces and harder surfaces for several days, and on cardboard and stuff like that certain other times. So cleaning surfaces is very important. Again, the same reason we're washing our hands, we're cleaning our surfaces. So door handles, things you touch regularly, cooking surfaces, cleaning, bathroom stall stuff. Be really cautious about, going into those areas, but make sure they're all cleaned. And again, just any disinfectant will take care of this virus. Any soaps will take care of it. And yes, depending on the surface, the virus can survive 2 hours to 9 days on the surface. But if you keep cleaning it, you'll be okay. And again, we're going from personal NPIs to environmental NPIs to community NPIs. So the community non-pharmaceutical interventions are, again, what you've all been hearing about. Quarantine yourself, social distance, practice social distance, avoid close face-to-face contact with people. Now you may think, well, I'm not sick and they're not sick. That's the problem. You don't have to be sick to spread this disease, okay, spread this virus. You can be spreading the virus when you're not symptomatic, okay, for 4 days. That means you can walk around for several days spreading this virus and not even know you're sick. By the time you realize you're sick, you may spread to people who are vulnerable or at risk. And think about it, if you're at a party and you are infected but not symptomatic, and you talk to everyone at the party and shake hands and, hug or whatever, in 4 days from now, think about all the people at the party and all the people they've contacted with and all the people they've met and hung out with, and magnify your impact greatly. We don't want to become what they call super spreaders, people who are responsible for spreading the virus beyond the normal human-to-human contact. There was a super spreader in the MERS outbreak, a guy from South Korea who was in the Middle East, and he took the virus back to South Korea with him, the MERS virus, and I think he infected 157 people, just him alone. And so we don't want to be that person. We don't want to be that person that spreads it around. So, I know a lot of young people are being criticized right now for going outside, and I saw pictures of people in Australia on the beach, hanging out on the beach together still. Yes, this virus does not seem to be too problematic for younger people, but we don't want to be spreading the virus. We want to be protecting the more vulnerable people in our environment, in our communities. So listen to the orders, maintain your social distance, and don't gather in large groups, and help slow this spread down to allow the hospitals time to cope or to ramp up to be able to cope. Again, we don't want to overwhelm them. We don't overwhelm our system. Because when things get overwhelmed, they break. And when things break, people die. And we don't want that to happen. And as you're all aware, we're all working from home right now. We're all doing online school. We're all kind of trying to be avoided. I know the government shut down a lot of schools in many districts, and I think around the world, pretty much schools are shut down, which causes problems. There's a benefit to that. There's also a problem. A lot of the nurses, a lot of the medical staff have children. If their kids are out of school, they've got to stay at home and take care of them. So, there's no easy solution to all this. And again, we're in unprecedented territory here with this pandemic, and we're trying to figure it out, but we're going to learn a lot. And one of the things I do recommend you do while you're at home at this time is to write down some of the things you're learning that you would like to have done better for the next one, and how what you would like to have in your house, what you'd like to have known more about, etc. Now, this is where it kind of gets a bit more controversial because there's so many people out there. I know a lot of people in the Christian community are very big on what we call alternative medicines. I know there tends to be how do I say this nicely, a idea that the pharmaceutical companies are hiding or not allowing certain drugs to come through or whatever, or that there is some sort of magical powers in certain other things. I'm not going to get too caught up in all those kind of ideas. I just want to let you know that there is currently no treatment for viruses, especially this one. And the most effective treatment is vaccination, whether you believe in vaccines or not. I think most people have a problem with vaccines, tend to have problems with the preservatives in vaccines. Vaccines have been very effective in history to eradicate some of the worst diseases and viruses in humanity. But we're all concerned about the mercury-based preservatives in vaccines. is usually where the problems lie, and a lot of them being removed, especially for children's vaccines. But vaccines in themselves do not kill the virus. They are there to prepare our immune system for an invasion by the virus and to help them respond much more quickly to the virus so they can be destroyed before it takes a hold of our bodies. And again, if you have questions about vaccines, we'll talk about it a bit later on, but that could be a whole day discussing vaccines. It's a big topic, but yeah, most of the treatment right now that we have for this is basically symptomatic. That means you just try and make the patient comfortable, support what's going on, keep them alive, keep their O2 levels up, keep their organs functioning as long as possible. But ultimately, in severe cases, this virus will overwhelm the system and people basically die from lack of oxygen. Their lungs are compromised to the point where they can no longer breathe. And that's where the pneumonia kicks in, or has kicked in, and they can no longer survive. Even people who do survive, they can have long-lasting tissue scarring in the lungs, and the recovery can be exhaustive and a long process. So again, the vaccines, there are many countries right now trying to develop a vaccine for this. Many are racing to create a vaccine. The vaccine process is very complicated, and there are many different ways you can make a vaccine. And so people are trying from all different, many different options making vaccines. And again, I'm not going to get into that too much right now, but I think some of the best estimates are 18 months for a vaccine for this kind of situation. I mentioned before that it took 26 years to develop the vaccine for the rotavirus. And again, once you understand how the immune system works and how we create vaccines and the complicated process of how do we determine which part of the virus will cause an immune response and how do we present that to the immune system in a way that allows the immune system to recognize the virus when it appears later on, is complicated. Vaccines are great because, they do end up creating the memory B cells that survive 10, 20 years in our system that can recognize the virus very quickly when it appears later on. And again, we mentioned that they were talking about, or they were trying to create a vaccine for the SARS virus, but because the SARS virus went away so quickly because of the quarantine situation, all the funding dried up and no one was interested in producing a vaccine for a virus that no longer exists. Now, that may be short-sighted, the virus may come back, but again, companies don't want to just produce viruses for the sake of producing vaccines, so they want to actually, if SARS had lasted longer, there'd probably be a SARS vaccine by now. One of the things that, let's move across a little bit. So this leads me to really the most important thing we can be doing for ourselves at this time, and that is strengthening our immune systems. So again, I mentioned before that our immune systems are some of the most wonderfully designed, complicated, incredibly robust systems in our body, and they can deal with a lot of things. And usually when the disease ends, it's because the immune system has ramped up and dealt with it. And then it doesn't kill the virus, it prevents the virus from spreading any further, and the virus is destroyed by our white blood cells, and then it no longer can impact us. Unfortunately, the time it takes for the immune system to catch up to that process, the virus could have done damage already. And that's where that lag is problematic. And the vaccines are meant to reduce that lag so there is no destruction of the virus prior to the immune system kicking in, because the vaccines help alert the immune system, you could say, to, it's like an all points bulletin to the police department. Here, keep an eye out for this guy or this virus. And all our white blood cells are really geared up to look for it and to recognize it straight away. But yes, the immune system is a very complex thing, but it can be strengthened and it can be weakened. So I want to talk a little bit about what we can do to strengthen our immune system at this time. And guess what? It's all going to revolve around rest, exercise, and healthy eating. The things we all like to talk about, things we all like to get involved in, but it's time for us to get healthy. This is a great time to focus on building up our immune systems and making them strong. Our immune system is the number one defense we have against viruses, okay? So, sleep. We need to get lots of sleep. Sleep is key to a strong immune system. You've all probably experienced lack of sleep or sleep deprivation for a few days and then got sick because of that. Once you start getting sleep deprived or you get stressed and you're not sleeping very well, then your immune system becomes weakened. Okay, it suppresses the immune system and it can let these bacteria and viruses take over a little bit and can run rampant. So we need to start getting lots of rest. And what better time to rest than when we're at home in quarantine? This is a great time to get some rest. We have to learn how to rest. Stress is a big killer in our society. You could probably attribute it to a lot of our health concerns, but stress is really killing us. Our work stress, our life stress, whatever it is that's causing us to be sleep deprived, this is killing us, and we have to take care of ourselves. We need to find our rest. Especially as Christians, we were told to rest every Sabbath. We need to really start to operate in our Sabbath rest. What God is doing and what He's going to be doing in the next couple of years on this planet is going to require people who are rested. We don't want to go into the next season of the Lord tired and worn out. We want to be able to be people who find our strength in our rest. So get healthy sleep at this time. The next thing we need to do to help strengthen our immune system is to eat healthy. We have to start eating foods as they are found in nature, not highly processed foods. I was with some young people the other day camping, and I tried my first Pop-Tart, and I was horrified at just how completely non-healthy Pop-Tarts are. I'm going to get in trouble for this. You talk to my lawyers. But it's cake for breakfast. We can't be eating cake for breakfast and think we're going to be healthy. And, I was at the store the other day and I saw people walking out with shopping carts full of sodas. Sugary drinks and sugary foods actually negatively impact our immune system. There has been studies that show that a can of soda can suppress your immune system for up to 4 hours after drinking it. So if you're drinking a can of soda every couple of hours, then you're living with a suppressed immune system. Now, part of that is to do with how vitamin C and sugar interact with the immune system. We'll get to that in a little bit, but basically we have to get away from all this refined sugar addiction. We have to start eating healthy foods. That means your fruits and vegetables, your berries, your whole grains, stuff like that food as you would find it in nature, not food that is so far removed from anything you possibly see in nature. I used to love eating Cheetos until I realized that Cheetos have no food in them. They're all just chemically produced substances. So really take this time to start thinking about the food you're eating and to strengthen your immune system, okay? Again, your immune system is the key to fighting this disease or this virus. And if it's strong, it will do its job. If you weaken it through high sugar content foods, refined sugars, then you're basically going to be hurting yourself and you won't be able to fight this with the full strength you need to fight this with. I was at the store and I could see that all the fruits and vegetables were all still on the shelves, but all the paper products and all the sodas were all gone. And that just shows you how little we understand about what we're doing today. Toilet paper won't save your life. Toilet paper is not even essential at this point. There are other ways you can clean your butt, but there are very few ways you can strengthen your immune system. And all that fruit and vegetables on those shelves that no one's touched yet, that's where it should be. Those shelves should be cleared out. And if those shelves are cleared out, that's how we know people are acting wisely at this time. But right now they're all full, and so I was able to go get everything I needed to shop with, to feed my family and household. So there you go. Anyway, vitamin C. Vitamin C is really an interesting vitamin. It is very key to strengthening the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are the white blood cells that are very much involved in our immune system response. These are the T cells, B cells, and the NK cells. NK stands for natural killer cells. These are the cells that attack cancer cell tumors. Cells of the cancerous tumors. They are very important to protecting us. Vitamin C strengthens, activates, helps them work harder, causes them to proliferate in our bodies. Vitamin C is really important. And vitamin C is cheap and it's everywhere, and you can get it from fruits again, or take it with supplements. But vitamin C can really help you at this time. And one of the reasons why sugar is so impacting on our immune system is because sugar and vitamin C are very similar in their structure as compounds, and lymphocytes tend to absorb vitamin C to help in its functioning. In the presence of a lot of sugar, the lymphocytes will absorb the sugar instead, which won't help it actually fight anything or get stronger. It'll actually weaken it. So if we start taking vitamin C supplements and reduce our sugar intake, we're actually going to really help boost our lymphocyte function. Again, our white blood cells, key to the immune system. T cells and the B cells especially are involved in the production of antibodies, which will help stop the viruses in our blood. So vitamin C is really key at this time. And again, there are studies that show this, and if you're interested in me sending you those studies, I can make them available to you. There are lots of studies about their impact, vitamin C's impact in our immune system. Things we can do to also help our immune system is quit our bad habits. We need to stop smoking. Now, if you're a student at MSU, you are very aware of my dislike of vaping. We need to stop doing things that are making our lungs weaker and unable to deal with foreign particles. Our lungs have lots of defense mechanisms inside them to protect us from stuff trying to get into our lungs and destroy us. If we are smoking and if we are vaping, then we are prohibiting those natural defenses from operating correctly, and we're making ourselves more vulnerable to these kind of viruses. So please, for the love of all that's holy in this world, stop vaping, young people. Vaping is the dumbest thing ever created in the history of the universe, in my personal opinion. This is my little rant now I'm going on. But stop it. It is killing you, and it's not going to be very helpful. And again, smoking is even worse. So stop these things that are killing your immune system and making your lungs unable to fight the good fight, okay? Quit these bad habits. Stop vaping. I can see every student right now in my school laughing right now because they just know how much I don't like vaping. The other thing is, this is a big one, alcohol also impairs our immune system. So we need to reduce or stop drinking altogether at this time to help our immune systems recover and to fight the good fight. So avoid smoking and drinking at this time and get our immune systems healthy. Another key to this is exercise and obesity. It's time to get in shape, says the overweight guy sitting in this chair right now. Being obese is not great for your immune system. It affects it in negative ways, and it causes the immune response to slow down. Okay, so we need to start losing weight. We need to start exercising. Exercise has a positive effect on our immune system. It stimulates our immune systems. So we need to start doing exercise. What a better time to exercise than in quarantine? We can start doing our little daily workouts to some sort of YouTube video or something if you want. Get your little bike or get your little yoga mat out or whatever it is and go to town. But start exercising and getting a bit healthy. A good hour of exercise every other day will make you feel way better and also makes you sleep better as well. So all these things are intertwined. Healthy food, healthy sleep, healthy exercise will all help each other. And you'll feel better about yourself. What better time to get in shape and to get healthier than to be stuck at home and figuring this out. The bottom line to all this is it's time to get healthy. So again, we want to do things to strengthen our immune system. Again, it is the key to us surviving these diseases, okay? Again, it is incredible system. It is powerful system. It is well tuned to fight for us within us. But we must give it a fighting chance by feeding it all the right things and taking care of ourselves so that our immune system is at level 10, not at level 2, and able to deal with these viruses. If you have any questions about that, feel free to continue to ask questions. I'm going to move on a little bit. Let me talk about this first quickly. So I didn't mention this earlier. I'll mention it right now. One of the keys to viruses entering our cells is their attachment. So we saw a picture earlier of the coronavirus with these protein spikes on the outside. And this new virus is much better at binding to our cells than SARS was, for example. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples of this. If you have, this is the receptor on the our cells. This is the ACE2 receptor that exists on lung cells and other cells in our tissues. And if this is the virus receptor or the virus protein, the SARS virus kind of like didn't really connect very well. It was like kind of like maybe a two-finger grip onto our receptor. So it wasn't able to get into our cells very easily, nor was able to bond very strongly to this ACE2 receptor. Now, this new coronavirus kind of fits perfectly. The shape of the protein on the outside of the new coronavirus actually fits really perfectly onto the ACE2 inhibitor, so the ACE2 receptor on our cells, and it bonds way more strongly. So it's able to get a hold of our cells and bond onto it very, very strongly, much more than the SARS did. And this is why it's much more effective. The other thing, though, is that in order for the virus to enter our cells, this protein spike must split. Okay? It must split in two, and then the cells and the stuff inside can enter into the cell. And then once the RNA is in our cell, then our machinery will make the virus for it. Now, in the SARS virus, this was not very effective. It wasn't able to split very easily and get into our cells very easily. This new coronavirus actually can split this protein spike very easily because it uses an enzyme that is readily available in our tissues called furin. Now, this furin enzyme is in our tissues all the time, and it actually opens this spike up for the coronavirus and allows it into our cells. This is why we're seeing such a much more infective and more effective virus in this coronavirus 19 than we did see in SARS. Again, it's all about the molecular structure of these proteins and how they fit onto certain receptors. So I just want to mention that now because I didn't mention it earlier. But, these things are complicated. These whole structures are complicated. And each virus is a little bit different, and how it impacts us is a little bit different. But this new coronavirus can get into our upper and lower respiratory systems, and that's why it can cause such problems. So, let me have a look if there's any questions going on here. I want to go into just some ideas about, being at home, being prepared, and quarantining yourself. Again, it's really key that as responsible adults in today's world, we have to listen to what the government advisories are and try and, as much as possible, obey our governments at this time. They're not doing it for their own sake, they're doing it for the sake of our communities, and we don't want to be the person that continues to walk around and act like, who cares, or I'm not going to get sick from this, I'm not worried. That's not the attitude we should have. We really have to be looking after, again, flattening the curve, preventing the spread too much, protecting our healthcare workers from overloading them with too many patients, and just, keeping ourselves a distance from people right now to really help slow this virus down and even stop it from getting out of control. So if it's in your area and you're at home, then I'm sure if you're home with the kids especially, if you're home with elderly parents, whatever it is. I'm sure there's some concerns you have. I'm sure you've been to the stores. This is not like, a true shelter-in-place situation. You can leave the home. You can go and buy food. There's still food in the shelves. We're not losing our power. We're not losing our water. So a lot of preparations that people may have put in place for situations like this may not be necessary. But in a more problematic pandemic, which could come later at any point, it is helpful to have certain supplies in your house. Now, again, if it's a really severe pandemic, then you might lose all your workers in the electrical plant. So you might lose all the workers that control the water or the phone companies or whatever it is. So you start losing essential services. That's when things get really bad. We are not at that stage. We probably won't get to that stage during this pandemic. But those are things you can think about later on. If this was more severe, what would I really need to have in my house to be prepared for something like this? Because, a 72-hour grab bag, which a lot of people talk about having a little go bag next to their door in their car, it's not going to really cut it during a pandemic. Even if a couple of weeks of supplies won't really cut it. So you're looking at maybe having a month worth of supplies in your house to really protect yourself and your family from the long-term effects, the long-term issues revolved around sheltering in place. So we're going to have another little break right now. I'm going to shift to another topic in a second. But if you have any questions, again, please write them down or send them on Facebook Live, and we'll continue to address them in the next session. And we'll come back at 11 o'clock for one final session and answer some questions. And then we're going to talk about tomorrow a little bit. I mentioned it right now, but tomorrow we're going to have Tom Hardiman coming in the studio with me. And we're going to talk about some of the biblical perspectives and prophetic perspectives on this coronavirus. Me and Tom were involved in a roundtable with leaders from churches all over America and I think the world. And there's a lot of very interesting things God is saying to his people at this time. And so tomorrow, tune in for that. We're going to be talking about, what is God really speaking to us at this time? What is really the Christian response? And how do people deal with these things in the Bible? There was many plagues in the Bible, and how is it dealt with then? So don't feel like we're trying to be anti-spiritual today by looking at all the science of coronavirus, but I want to get some science down. Then we'll look into the spiritual perspective tomorrow. Anyway, let's have a break, and we'll come back at 11 o'clock, and I'll talk to you more about being prepared for pandemics. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome back. We are on the topic of the coronavirus right now, and we've gone through a lot of information today. Very kind of factual information, I hope, and hope it's helpful to you guys out there. One of the things that I always believe is that the more we know, the less we fear. And don't get me wrong, there is things to be concerned about with this virus, especially if you fall within the more at-risk age group and with certain conditions. So don't think this is just a matter of don't worry about it. That's not what I'm trying to say here today. There is things to be concerned about. We need to be aware, we need to be wise at this time, and we need to listen to what our governments are trying to tell us and to our law enforcement community, and especially to our medical community. But I don't want us to be overwhelmed with fear. I don't want us to be acting out of fear or acting irrationally this time and trying to hoard things and, you know, all that kind of craziness going on, fighting over toilet paper in grocery stores. It's just a little bit too much at this time. We should be working together, you know, take what you need, leave the rest for others. You know, I told that story of this couple of brothers who traveled all around, I think it was Tennessee or something like that, who bought up all the hand sanitizer in every store they could go to and tried to sell it for like high prices on the internet. That's not the kind of behavior we want to be doing this time. We need to be taking care of each other, looking out for each other. It's not a time to be making profit off people's fears. It's a time to be really taking care of each other and looking out for each other. So I want to talk about this last session, just what we need to learn from this. And again, I mentioned earlier that very early on in this situation, Rick Joyner made a comment that we need to learn from this because this is more of a trial run for the big one. And I really do believe that. This is a learning opportunity for the world. And the world has a lot of things to learn. We were caught with our pants down proverbially at this time. People weren't aware of it. This may be the first time you've even heard of coronaviruses. But the scientific community has been aware of this for a long time. They've been concerned about the possibility of a pandemic breaking out like this. Is probably the biggest concern most scientists have as far as the ability to wipe out large populations of people. You know, viruses are constantly mutating and coming into our population, and, you know, this is not going to be the worst one we've ever dealt with. It won't be the worst one we're ever going to deal with. It could become a lot worse. And if the next one comes around, it could be the one that wipes out all the young people and protects the old people. So you just don't know what's going to happen the next time. So, you know, this is a trial run. This is a great opportunity to learn and be prepared for the next big one. And so if this is your first time understanding or learning about viruses and the possibility of pandemics, then really take from this experience the valuable lessons. When I was tasked to go down to work in Katrina after the hurricane, remember Rick Joyner said to us, we need to learn from this. We need to learn about how to deal with disasters. We need to learn all we need to learn at this time. And that's one of the things we really took away from that, is so many valuable lessons about how does a church respond to these things. What's the church's role in response to disasters? We've never had a pandemic. Well, what's the church's role in dealing with a pandemic? What should we be doing? Are our churches vulnerable to these kind of things? Are we prepared to go online? Are we able to survive being online as churches? How can we be effective in ministry as Christians during pandemics? You know, can we utilize technology readily? And are we able to use technology to really continue to minister to each other, to disciple each other, to pray for each other? And so these are great things we should be talking about, and things we need to be kind of unpacking after this is all over and we've all kind of calmed down, everything's kind of settled down a little bit, which who knows when that will be. But it's a great opportunity to learn. And, you know, life is all about learning. So let's talk about some of the things that we would normally say before a situation like this, what we need to have in the household. Just to kind of get your thinking process operating. What does it mean to be prepared? What would you have done differently 6 months ago, knowing that you're going to be where you're at today? Like going back 6 months, what would you have done differently? What would you have had in your house? What would you be prepared for? Now, of course, you're going to say, I wish I'd bought toilet paper and was selling it on eBay. But going beyond that, what really do we need to have in our houses? So one of the things we always talk about when we talk about preparation is that it's the better equipped you are, the better prepared you are for these kind of situations, the less you're reliant on the government and the less you're reliant on gathering in long lines with other people. Now, again, if you have your own stockpiles at home, if you have your own resources at home, and you're able to not have to go to the supermarket every day or go to the supermarket and stand in big lines, this is where the infection is spreading. If you're in a supermarket surrounded by people who are fighting over toilet paper or who are lining up and trying to get all they can before the shops close, then you're at risk of being infected. And so having all these resources already available to you in your house means you can kind of avoid that initial panic phase and come in later on when you maybe actually need some fresh fruits, vegetables, or whatever it is. So being prepared is not about fear, it's about being self-reliant. We know from Katrina that the government can get easily overwhelmed in situations, and it can take a long time for the government to respond in certain situations. Now, in a pandemic, every state's on their own. There's not like one state that's really hit and everyone else is fine. Good example of that is like the recent fires in Australia. There may be on any fire or any summer season, or any fire season in Australia, one state that gets really badly hit with a fire. But when you have a situation where every state is on fire, then you're overwhelming the system. That means no one can send resources from other states to help the one state. Everyone's overwhelmed. And the same thing happening here with hospitals can't send extra doctors and extra nurses to other states because their state's overwhelmed. And so with pandemics, everyone's overwhelmed. And so the government can also get quickly overwhelmed and get caught behind. And so being prepared ourselves is key to avoiding any of this fear and panic that kicks in. When I was away just a couple of weeks ago, I was away for about a week, and I started to hear all this stuff happening in America, because when I left, it was kind of under control. When I came back, it was definitely out of control. But I knew I already had stuff at home that I could easily live on for a month. So I didn't panic. I wasn't scared or concerned about getting home and getting supplies quickly or running to the store. I knew I had stuff in my house that I was able to go home and just relax and just start using my own resources rather than panicking and having to run to the store. Of course, I do go to the store. Obviously, stores are still open, and you still can go to the store. I don't think we're going to see a situation at this pandemic where the stores are shut down or there's no food on the shelves. So, but the next one, maybe that will be the case. So a lot of things we need to kind of look at and learn from this at this time. One of the big things that obviously in pandemics is limiting your exposure to other people. Again, because this is asymptomatic spread, you don't know who's spreading the virus and who's not spreading the virus. You can't look at a person with a fever and a cough and say, well, they've got it, and this guy over here who's not coughing and has no fever doesn't have it. They both could have it, both be spreading it. You could hang out with your best friend and he could be spreading the virus to you the entire time and you won't know about it. So it's really important that we limit the exposure at this time. And again, listen to the government alerts, pay attention to what they're saying, and just try and be compliant as much as possible with those demands. Again, they're trying to save lives. They're trying to slow the virus down. And by us acting arrogantly or without care or just kind of going on with this normal stuff and gathering and hanging out with your friends and spreading the virus around, we just make the system worse. Or make the situation worse. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to be those people that make things worse. We want to be people who are respectful of others, respectful of people who are vulnerable in our communities, and do what we're told to a certain degree. Now, this is what you might consider being called a shelter-in-place scenario, where in some disasters you're required to leave the area, like hurricanes. You don't shelter in place necessarily in a hurricane, although I've met many people who have sheltered in place during a hurricane, and I can promise you they all regretted it. I met a couple down in, I think it was in Louisiana, who stayed in their house on the couch looking out their window at the bay while the storm turned up. And they were hit with a 20-foot wave of water. they were washed off their couch and pinned under their couch for 12 hours before they were rescued. So most times we don't want a shelter in place. Sometimes it's unavoidable. But this is what you consider a shelter in place scenario. Not strictly, because a lot of times in shelter in place we're dealing with chemical spills. For example, there was that train wreck in a town, I think it was in Pennsylvania. That may not be the right place. But the chemical spill and the gas and the coming off from that spill from the fire was dangerous. People were told to go inside and stay inside. That's a shelter-in-place scenario. If there was a situation in a nuclear power plant, you might be asked to shelter in place. In those cases, you are asked to kind of like seal up the windows, seal up the doors, prevent any air getting into the house, and kind of separate yourself from the entire outside world and the outside air to avoid any exposure to any of the chemicals or whatever it is that's spreading around. We don't do that during pandemics. You don't need to seal the windows and seal the house up. That's not how this stuff is going to be spreading. And so, but we stay inside to avoid connection with people. Now, of course, these situations, as you're realizing, can last weeks and months. We're now in a place where I think the school systems in our state, here in South Carolina or North Carolina, are shut down till May 15th. That's a month and a half from now. And so it'll be about 2 months of shutdown. And maybe some of the businesses, a lot of churches are shut down. Some are going to be revisiting that maybe mid-April. But we're looking at weeks to a month, not just days. And so I guess I'm thinking about what it means to be in a house with your family or with your, immediate family, either young kids or grandparents, whoever it is that you live with, what it means to be shut in an environment together with them and how you're going to survive that. Now, obviously, today with our Netflix and internets and all that stuff, I'm sure some of the people out there love this. I'm personally a bit of an introvert, and I'm having a great time. I actually getting a lot of rest and spend time with my family and getting a lot of work around the house done. So I'm kind of enjoying it at this time. But of course, I want to get back to normal life. I want to get back to work at some point, get back into the classroom and be teaching students face-to-face rather than staring at a camera, which is always very fun. Again, we're in a situation where we're not losing power, we're not losing water. Things are okay. So it's not a very difficult situation. But if we did lose power, if we did lose our water, then do we have the resources available to take care of that? Do we have the batteries and the flashlights and the candles, whatever it is that you have prepared? Now, most people should have, I highly recommend that every household have a basic preparedness kit of just things to take care of. Lighting, water. How do you get clean water? Do you have clean water in your house in case the water goes down? And that can go down for many reasons, whether it be a disaster or just a broken pipe. We had a broken pipe here in our neighborhood recently and the water was out for a day. Not a huge deal, but if it was a bigger problem, it could be a week, it could be several days. So how do you get clean water? And of course, there's a big rush on the water at the stores. And so do you have stuff at home you take care of it? Do you have enough water in your house just to last a few weeks? I know I do. I know I have a stockpile of water in the house just sitting there. Water doesn't expire, much to, even though it has an expiration date on it, I think it's fine for a long time. The other thing I think about when you're at home is you may have to isolate yourself from other people in your house. Now, if something happens and one of your members in your house gets sick, then how do you isolate that person within your house? Do you have a room? Do you have a sick room? People can go, that's a sick room. I know during the Spanish flu, it was not uncommon for there to be a dead person in most houses in America. Because it took time for the government to kind of get around to picking up all the dead bodies from the houses. So that's the worst case scenario when you got a dead person in your house just sitting there. How do you deal with that? These are things you got to start thinking about, for a much worse case scenario. But do you have sanitizers? Do you have the mask you can put on the sick person to prevent the spread? Do you have a separate bathroom they can use? All those kind of things you got to start thinking about. What do I do if someone gets sick in their house? How to avoid that spread? How do I quarantine someone within my quarantine? And again, going outside is always risky. You want to stay inside as much as possible because, again, we just don't know who's infected. And we don't know where that person is infected, what they touched last or what you touched. Or we are so bad at touching our faces. I think we touch our face 23 times an hour or something like that, and on average. And so it's unconscious. I did a talk recently and I was talking about not touching your face. And probably about 5 times in the next 20 minutes after that, I touched my face. And it was kind of humorous for the crowd, but it's such an unconscious thing we do. We have an itch, we scratch it, and so forth. So avoiding going outside and getting the virus itself is important. So sheltering in place is part of that whole process. Moving across here. Again, we talked about the idea of how much supplies we need to have in our house. The grab bag, which is the 3-day supply of water, food, and essentials, medicines especially in that, and first aid. That's usually for if you have a situation where you have to leave the house, hurricane, tornado, earthquake, whatever it is, things that happen that can destroy the habitat or our houses. We have to take that grab bag and go, knowing that within 3 days we'll probably find a shelter. There'll be a Red Cross shelter somewhere. There'll be government set up, some help, food distribution, whatever. But given that having that 3 days of supplies will get us to the next level of help. In these situations, that's not ideal. They're good to have. It's always good to have a grab bag in your house. I recommend them. There's many great products out there. You can build your own. I highly recommend you building your own rather than buying one. Because when you build your own, you know exactly what's in the bag and how to use it, hopefully. When you tend to buy a grab bag, you really don't pull it apart and go through it bit by bit and understand what's in there. So by the time you actually have an emergency, you're kind of like, what's in my bag? What do I need? Maybe what I want in there is not in there. So I'd highly recommend you building your own grab bags for that kind of stuff. But when it comes to these kind of situations, usually looking at about a week or 2 weeks as a minimum preparation you need to really be effective in a pandemic. A month is ideal. If you want to go to the 6-month deal, it gets a little bit more complicated. A lot of the food sources that put in 6-month prep kits are not very nutritious. I work with a lady who had her own organics company, and she actually tried to survive homesteading on a 6-month kit from a prepping source. And within 3 months, I think it was 2 or 3 months, all her family was sick and not doing very well because there's so little nutrition in the food they're eating. And so be really careful about buying, food sources, for 6 months at a time, or things are going to last for 11 years or whatever, 12 years. The longer a food source will last in your garage, the less nutritious it is. I spend a lot of time camping and taking students out in the wilderness, and we kind of get them to eat MREs, which are the military rations. And if you ever get a chance to live on military rations for a few days, you'll understand just how awful it is. And so the idea you live on them for 6 months at a time would be terrible. So be really careful about the 6-month supply. If you want to get that, go for it. But usually when you're dealing with 2 weeks supply of food or a month supply, you can really kind of get food you can rotate into your supply and rotate out. If you were to buy stuff right now, apples can last quite a few times. Eggs last. A lot of things that will last a while that are actually nutritious and healthy for you. It can help boost your immune system. Again, remember, if you're trying to survive on food for a long period of time, you have to have food that's nutritious that's going to help boost your immune system. If it's basically cardboard with flavoring, then it's not going to help you very much. It's not going to boost your immune system and keep you healthy. We have to have food that's going to survive. Once you get beyond, if we're in a situation where there's no food on the shelves for 6 months and you're living on rations, it's probably best to buy seeds and start growing your own food at that point because things have changed fundamentally. I won't get too much into all the food supply. I mean, you guys we've been in this quarantine situation for a while now, and you guys are kind of learning as you go what works, what doesn't work, what's good food to buy. But again, just keep reinforcing this with you all. Buy nutritious food. Buy food that's going to actually boost your immune system, that's going to strengthen your immune system. Try and take this time to break any addictions you might have to sugar, especially refined sugar. That means sodas, that means junk food, that means just highly processed foods. Try and take this time to break your addiction to that stuff and try and live on some healthy foods. Because, I know a lot of Christians who have a lot of healthy alternative medicines they like to use, essential oils, stuff like that, but they eat junk food. We have to really get into a place where we start really thinking about what food is good for me that will boost my immune system. Because again, your immune system is key to fighting these things. The difference between someone who's going to survive this and someone who's going to get wiped out by this is going to be your immune system, and to get that really healthy. Now again, there are people in the community, people who are vulnerable, who have existing conditions that are not necessarily fault of their own, and again, they just got to be really careful and really protect those people. But much as we can, much as it's up to us and we're able, let's get healthy and get food that's going to actually benefit us. So yeah, I'm not going to go through all the foods you can buy, but the other thing we need to think about is hygiene products. I know toilet paper was a big deal this year. That's not necessarily a critical thing. It's a comfort thing for sure. But there are many other ways to clean your butt than just toilet paper. But, other things like diapers, you don't be caught at home without any diapers. Female products, these are things that are much more important and much more essential. Baby wipes, if you've got babies in the house. I have 2 young kids in diapers right now, and it is a lot of products you've got to use to keep them healthy and happy. So make sure you have plenty of that stored around. Hand soap, sanitizers, cleaning supplies, all those things are important to help maintain your environment and not spread the disease. One of the big things that has come up, and I don't know if many people realize this, but medications. A lot of people in America and around the world are very dependent on prescription drugs. And I think you've probably heard by now the idea that a lot of our prescription drugs come from overseas, especially China. And so if there was a disruption in our supply chain, then we'd run out of drugs pretty quickly. And so one of the best things that possibly could happen from this whole situation is that America takes back its pharmaceutical production and actually starts producing things in the country. I know during the bird flu outbreak, there was talk of building Tamiflu factories to produce Tamiflu within the country. Don't know whether it happened or not, but, we have to start thinking about where we're getting our medicine from. Because one thing to, have it on the shelves, but once that runs dry and we have our supply chain problems, then we can't go without prescription medication. We've got a lot of people who are dependent on those things for their life, for their comfort, for their safety, and we can't go without it. So hopefully that this will kind of awaken up a lot of countries to realize we need to take back our drug production facilities and start to have them in-house in our countries. One thing to think about also is just the basics of symptomatic care. So things like cold and flu symptom relief. NyQuil is one of my favorites. Get some good night's sleep. Decongestants, Tylenol, cold and flu products. Those kind of things that help reduce fevers and take away pain. Very helpful to have around. If you are, so go back to prescription drugs. If you are on prescription drugs, you can sometimes ask your doctor for an extra prescription and put away a prescription in your stockpile. Just a month's worth, in case something like this happened and the supply chain does go down, you can have those available to you. So think about that. Think about everything you use on a daily basis, and if it went away, what would you do? And how would you survive? Again, the personal protection equipment, the PPEs, gloves, masks, like that, you can have them around. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not as helpful, but those are things you can definitely use in a case like this. The Tamiflu, I mentioned the Tamiflu there again. Tamiflu is not going to save you in this situation. It's not going to help you with coronavirus. It's purely for the influenza A virus because it interacts on the neuraminidase receptor and not anything to do with coronavirus. Now, people have been asking me online about oils, essential oils. A lot of questions about essential oils. Not going to offend half the population of Christians in this world and say something about it. Go for it. My wife uses them a lot. She cleans with them a lot. Let's move on. Colloidal silver is something that's been mentioned a lot as well. Colloidal silver, I have seen no studies or anything like that related to colloidal silver killing viruses. I know it can infect bacteria, but bacteria and viruses are very different animals, different beasts, you might say. And so I'm not quite sure how colloidal silver would impact a virus. So not sure about that one, but it doesn't hurt necessarily, but I wouldn't necessarily go around telling people it cures viruses. People might have a mild case of the virus, takes colloidal silver and get better in a few days and think it cured them, but it may have just run its course anyway without the colloidal silver. I do highly recommend vitamins. Obviously, vitamin C we talked about is definitely a good supplement to be taking. There are other vitamins that help boost the immune system. People mention zinc a lot. There's, talk to anybody who has some understanding they're going to have all their favorites, but definitely do some research on that. There are definitely supplements that can help you boost your immune system. Again, don't drink bleach. Bleach is not going to help you. You can put a couple of drops of bleach in about a liter of water and help to purify the water in an emergency. Generally speaking, there was this thing going around the internet about if you drink bleach, you can wash your mouth out and protect you from the virus. That's obviously massively dangerous to do and absolutely not helpful to anybody. Another thing you got to worry about is your pets. If you have pets, think about your furry friends. Dogs and cats do not spread the coronavirus. We do know that. At the moment, that might change, but right now, dogs and cats are not at risk for the coronavirus and do not spread the coronavirus. If you happen to have pet bats or snakes or camels or civets, then please reconsider your choice of pets and go for a more conventional route. Bats definitely will spread it, and camels and snakes and all these other creatures do have the ability to spread and carry the virus. So don't go that direction. Other supplies you might think about is just, typical prepping supplies you should have at your house at all times: candles, flashlights, extra batteries, walkie-talkies, AM/FM radios, water filters. These are basic things you should all have in your house to protect you in a bag, in an area you know where it is, you can get it easily. These items are useful in many situations, not just for pandemics. They can be used for blackouts. They can be used for, burst water mains. They can be used for a lot of things that will help you, whether it's 24 hours, 12 hours, a week, 2 weeks. You should always have these things in your house. Another question people are looking at right now is, can I get deliveries to my house safely? So we live in the Uber age, the age of delivery to our houses for a DoorDash or whatever it is that you have. Instacart will bring groceries to your door for you. So these are great, obviously, to have. But again, you're at the mercy of the person handling all your groceries. So you may want to clean them down when you get them. If they're sick and they bring it to your house, they may have picked it from the shelf. If it's Instacart, they may be handling your containers or your food or your bags. So just be aware that, you take a little bit of a risk here, but me and my wife have been using them for last week to get some food in the house just because we like certain foods. And so we have done this against, just a small little precautions to do that. Pizza, obviously, cardboard boxes. The virus can survive on cardboard. So just wash your hands when you handle the cardboard before you eat. Throw the cardboard away, all that kind of stuff. Just be aware that it can be spread through deliveries, and just take the necessary precautions. If someone in your house gets sick, then by all means isolate them as soon as possible, and deep clean all the surfaces of your house. Do a quick little clean, make sure that it doesn't spread around the house. Usually, if you're living with somebody, by the time they've gotten sick or showing symptoms in this situation, you're probably all going to be sick at some point. It's too late to isolate somebody once they get symptomatic if they've been living with them for 4 days or 4 or 5 days. What's really important is if you have someone who's come home or is out working still, maybe keep them isolated for a little bit. If you have vulnerable people in your household, especially elderly people, keep them well isolated from anyone else in the house, and be really careful when you go out and come back in the house. In this situation, you do want to make sure you're protected when you're dealing with them and helping them and assisting them. And most cases will be mild, but if it gets severe, call 911. It's really important you don't just take the person directly to the doctors or the hospital. They want to know you're coming. They want to know what the deal is, because you might spread the infection as you travel with the person. So if you do have a problem and you do want help, especially if you have problems breathing, this is the key that's going to really, differentiate between a mild case and a severe case is the breathing. So if you're having the breathing issues, then you want to call it in and get help. But make sure you alert everyone as to your coming so they can take necessary steps, especially going to a doctor's office. Don't just turn up at a doctor's office and tell them I'm here for an appointment and just wait around while a doctor does doctor things, and then you spread the virus all throughout the waiting room. Times like this, some of the worst places to be is in hospitals and in doctors' offices. That's where all the sick people get together. So avoid that if possible, but again, if it gets severe and you start having problems breathing, then by all means, go to the doctors. And again, don't wait around in waiting rooms, reading old magazines while shedding virus. Keep connected. This is important to listen to what's going on in your neighborhood. Don't be that guy that has a big party while everyone else has been told to isolate. Keep connected to the local and state government situation reports and communications to know when the area is in the middle of a problem or at the end of a problem. These pandemics tend to wave through areas. They come through in waves, and then they'll peak, then they'll go down again, and they'll move on. If that happens, then be aware what point you're in. If you're at the peak, then stay inside. If you're at the back end, you may be able to wander out a little bit. But in the Spanish flu of 1918, I believe there was 3 waves of viruses that came through each area. So just be aware that this may be one wave. It could come another wave later on this year. We're not quite sure about how that works yet. Stay vigilant and maintain all preventive measures. Again, don't be fearful, don't be anxious, but be wise. This is a time to really learn, a time to rest, a time to connect, a time to just take a breath. I was really, when I was driving through the neighborhood the other day, I was looking around all these families just going out for walks. And I thought, wow, what an interesting time we live in where people are just told to go home and rest. And families connecting again, no work to be done. I know it's people are struggling financially, but this is a time just to take a pause on life and just kind of realign our priorities, realign what's important to us, and really take a stock of just where we're at in life. I've really enjoyed this time just to kind of sit and think and just spend time with my family and kind of watch this whole thing unfold and see how the world's reacting and what could be done differently, and looking at all the science behind it all. It's been a really interesting time. So I highly recommend this time is just take some rest, use it as a reset, use it as a time just to catch up on things you haven't caught up on for a while, to reduce your stress, to get healthy, to lose some weight, to enjoy the important things of life, the people around you and relationships. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's all I've got today. And again, this has been more of a scientific kind of perspective on the coronavirus. And tomorrow with Tom Hardiman, we're going to be dealing with more of the spiritual, prophetic / biblical kind of perspective on the virus. And again, Tom's got a lot of great insights from the Bible as well as from people all over the world, been talking about what God's been speaking to them about this virus and what it means for us as Christians, the church, and the entire world. So again, if you have any more questions, if anything today was, you have any comments to make, I'm happy to connect with those again tomorrow. I'll be here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with Tom, who will be kind of here on a computer screen because he's going to Skype in. But if you have any questions or anything we didn't address or anything you don't agree with, if you have any concerns about something I've mentioned already, then feel free to comment it on Facebook and we'll address it. Maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong, who knows, but we're happy to discuss it. This is an open discussion, this is a classroom environment, and we want to hear feedback, we want to hear opinions, we want to hear ideas, but keep it civil out there, keep it civil in our discussions. I know a lot of people are very passionate about certain things, and we want to keep our conversations civil no matter what we believe and what side of the spectrum we live on. So anyway, thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope you had a good time and you learned a lot. And I will see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.